Executive Officer of the Urban League of Greater Cincinnati and former president of the Private Industry Council. Jim Clingman, adjunct professor, University of Cincinnati Department of African American Studies on Black Entrepreneurship, and the founder of the Greater Cincinnati African American Chamber of Commerce. Also with us is Dan Radford, Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Cincinnati AFL-CIO Labor Council. And last but not least, Diesa Brown, President of the Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky African American Chamber of Commerce. Chip?
Thank you, Michelle, and I want to welcome our new panelists to our continuing discussion of Jim Crow in Cincinnati. And we're focusing on economics. How did Jim Crow impact economic opportunity for African Americans in Cincinnati? Let's focus, say, on 20th century, early 20th century. Sheila, I'll look to you first to lead us into this.
Well, Chip, it certainly had a dramatic impact on African Americans, on blacks, because it really dealt with systematic, legalized denial of opportunity. And when you're dealing with denial of opportunity in the job arena, you're talking about limiting blacks to the unskilled, semi-skilled opportunities. And then not only that, the unskilled laborers, African American males were unskilled laborers in the construction arena. Then you had black women who then were kind of limited to household chores and household duties, and then you had them also limited to the service industries. Then you had your managerial and professional blacks having to direct their attention to a segregated market. They had to really sell their goods and services and their services to individuals in their own group. So you had black doctors, dentists, their clients were African Americans or blacks. They could not offer those services to others. And so by limiting the outreach, limiting the market, limiting the job opportunities, obviously had a direct impact on the ability to have access to other amenities, because you weren't really making the income in order to really access other kinds of amenities. It also impacted education. It impacted access to accommodations, health, and any other number of things. Chip.
That's the great tragic irony here, is in this country that bills itself as the land of great opportunity and limitless chance to better yourself and to earn a living for yourself and your family. That was not the case. Let's add to this picture. Anyone? Where Jim Crow played out in economic opportunity, the denial of opportunity.
Well, I think, you know, I could add just a little bit to what Sheila said, and that would be in regard to what we see today, how it has moved forward, as the other panel talked about, and we see the remnants of it yet today in 2002. I think the whole denial of access to the general marketplace was the biggie when it comes to economic empowerment of black people during that time, and even now, that the lack of that access posed a huge problem, and we're still suffering from that today.
Did the 50s legislation, so in 60s civil rights legislation, did that help?
Well, I think it certainly did help. It really started to open the doors of opportunity. You had individuals like Whitney Young from the National Urban League that worked with the Johnson administration, really in terms of crafting the civil rights laws, and then with the affirmative action. All of those kinds of initiatives did open the door of opportunity. As it was played out, though, you saw that the major benefactor of the affirmative action was really white females. But certainly it did open the door, and it did provide, I think it helped legally provide a conscience for corporations and others to then start looking at having a more diverse workforce.
I think too, Chip, I think the Industrial Revolution had a lot to, you know, enhance and improve the careers of African Americans. After World War II was when the labor unions through the CIO you know, really started to open up and outreach to the African American, you know, community. You know, we are not proud of the fact that previous to that, the AFL, you know, the craft unions, you know, were less than open. But then as you got through the Industrial Revolution in manufacturing, when manufacturing first started, you know, the African American workers, both male and female, you know, they entered into the arena, and through the collective bargaining agreement, they were equal in pay and in other benefits. Unfortunately, and as Jim indicated, going from the past to present, you know, when the manufacturing base started to erode, we see now the service industry, which is low paying, low benefits, and this is where many of the low income, both white and black, are employed. And I think it's important to recognize that when anyone has a good paying job, that individual, that family who creates the teachers of this community, the nurses of this community, in another generation is doing much better. And I think we're at the crossroads, especially in Cincinnati. You know, we see the public sector, which are good, middle income paying jobs that's being eroded by privatization. This is the jobs that will create the teachers, the nurses of the future in the African American community. And we are very concerned with that.
You've suggested the issue, the importance of training, job training.
Absolutely.
How are we doing in Cincinnati?
Well, I think we have a ways to go, and I say that because I think a lot of the training is indeed that. I think we need more education around entrepreneurship. Dan talked about the jobs and the job market. That's very important, but it's also important for us to understand the value of ownership, business management. Those kinds of things must be taught to our children at a very young age, especially black youth, because for years and years as I grew up, it was always go to school, get a good job, get a good education, get a good job. Never go to school and start your own business and own something in this economy. That's the message that I feel has to be included along with the jobs that Dan just talked about and the training that Sheila does through the Urban League. We must incorporate the notion and the aspiration among our children, black children, that says to them, I can be a business person, I can own a business, I can create my own destiny, I can do for myself and own an income-producing asset in this economy.
And segregation
That would resonate with you, I
That's
would think, Piesa.
well, segregation really got us away from that ownership and the entrepreneurial spirit. Sheila alluded to the fact that there were doctors, there were dentists, there were lawyers, there were retailers, there were African Americans, blacks in the Cincinnati community who were owners of their own businesses. We've gotten away from that because people have been taught through the education system to do, as Jim said, go to school to get a job. Entrepreneurship is the foundation. We have several African-American entrepreneurs in this city right now. They need individuals to work with them, to work for them, but at the same time, training comes into play that if you're working for someone, there's an opportunity for you then to become a business owner yourself. Through a number of the efforts that are going on in this community, there are now opportunities for us to educate and instill in our young people that you can become your own employer, because we need employers just as we need employees. But those choices need to be made available to young people, indeed at a very young age, so that they know that that is a viable option for them in 2002 going forward.
Dan?
I agree with what has been said, but I bring back to reality of the present. We're in over the Rhine. We have a very high unemployment. We have a high poverty rate. There are no jobs. There's no transportation to jobs, which is another very critical item that has not been addressed by this community. In training, you know, I worked with Sheila and others for many, many years, and it's essential. But many times we train the young, the displaced workers, which we have many now, for jobs that aren't there, for not there. And it appears to me that this community needs to really focus on how to create jobs through entrepreneurship, but also, you know, I see tax money being used to bring companies in, which I agree with, you know, the biotech, whatever, and then the jobs they create is PhDs from other states and other areas. I beg the question, we have a problem in Cincinnati that we need to address, and it's a social economic problem as well as anything else. And let's look at putting everyone coming to the plate in creating good paying jobs with benefits, whether or not it's union or non-union, but someone where a family can live in dignity and to raise their family to really to produce and to create the atmosphere to where their children will be a teacher or a doctor or a small business owner. That's what we need to address now.
The Urban League has been on the cutting edge of training for a long time. Sheila?
Well, but I think that is one of the issues that Dan raised in terms of jobs that provide a living wage, jobs that provide benefits. You're dealing with a situation where you've got real challenges in your education system in terms of having youth that graduate with the skills, the competencies to really be able to compete, even in a competitive training program, and to be able to go on to post-secondary education. So we've got to really work with the school system so that they're producing individuals that can compete, not only in training programs that we offer, but can then go on to get, as I said, post-secondary training. But there are real issues in the workforce now. We're asking companies to really open up opportunities, to really think out of the box, because what we've seen is a real creation of what's really the peripheral worker, where there are people who are working part-time. And company after company are using the part-time workers so that they don't have to pay benefits. These individuals, it's not enough to have an adequate wage for your family. So we have to really look at ways of creating real opportunities.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, when you say a living wage,
Right.
something that allows a person to be competitive and to take care of their family. And we see that the gap is getting wider and wider between the haves and the have-nots, those that really don't have skills and they have to work at minimal jobs, women who have been moved out of welfare into work, and we're not talking about real jobs necessarily. They're real jobs, but they become the working poor. So we have to really look at and become recommitted to offering opportunities that really provide individuals with a real living wage and real opportunity and benefits. And companies and corporations can play a big role in that. We've got young men now who are ex-offenders, who companies won't touch. So how can we creatively as a community look at ways of tapping that population, tapping that human resource, rather than just bringing in, and I'll say this, bringing in immigrants to fill jobs, that we have people who are on the streets and in the prisons who have not had that opportunity.
Okay. I think the first thing to address is the issue of 2% of the individuals in this country controls 95% of the wealth. Let's look at that first, and a lot of these problems will go around.
I learned a while back that each year, the majority of the wealth is accumulated via inheritance.
That's
That's a staggering
right.
fact. Wealth that perhaps was accumulated 150, 200 years ago,
Generational wealth.
passes,
That in the African American.
Right.
and perhaps wealth that was ill-gotten,
That's right.
that
That's
was wealth based upon exploitation,
Right.
is passed from generation to generation.
That's why there's such a disparity that we see today. But again, that is reality. So what do we do about it? Sheila talked about the ex-offenders. Sure. What I'd like to do, and I do that, I'm scheduled to go to visit a prison and to talk to some ex-offenders about starting their own business, taking what they're learning there and coming out and starting their own businesses. It's just amazing to me that we don't tap into that as much as we should. Now, it's not like Tiesa and I are on the entrepreneurship side and they're on the training side. I was in training for 20 years and worked with Sheila many years ago. So I believe in all of this, but we must place more emphasis on entrepreneurship and ownership. I contend that if some of the youth who were throwing the bricks in Over the Rhine a couple of years ago, if they or their parents owned some of those businesses down there, they would have been less inclined to throw a brick through the window. Now, I'm not saying it's a panacea, but I'm saying ownership is key. It's key to economic empowerment. It's key to wealth building and wealth retention. And we must incorporate that into all of our programming, all of our thinking, all of the activities that we do in this city to improve it for all of us.
You know better than many how to start a business, what's needed and what isn't there now. Credit, capital, mentoring, what's needed?
You need access to information and education, first of all. Then you need access to the opportunity. Then you need access to capital. You need all three of those things to start a business. And it's just the access. I'm not saying that I'm going to go out and beg anyone to do things for me that I can do. And I preach that and teach that in my entrepreneur classes and talk to youth about it all the time. But we must have equal access to these kinds of things. And we talk about a level playing field. I suggest that black people purchase our own playing field and not spend a lot of time telling other people to level theirs. We have enough resources, enough intellectual capacity in this country and in this city to do a lot of things for ourselves if we do them collectively. So I'd like to put in a plug for Cincinnati to say that we just started an entrepreneurship high school. And I'm told that it's the first of its kind in the whole country.
All right. Sheila? All right.
I certainly agree with Jim. Certainly, as you look at entrepreneurship plays a key role, but as we look at the society that we're in Cincinnati, it does take both. It takes both the training programs and it takes the entrepreneurship, it takes jobs, it takes really all of it pulled together. There are a number of very strong initiatives going on in Cincinnati now. You've got initiatives under the Cincinnati CAN Commission. We've got the One Stop Employment Center that is really a combination, a partnership between a private sector entity and local community-based organizations where we are providing opportunities for job referral and placement. Corporations are joining with that one-stop shop, opening up and registering their jobs there. So there are more and more opportunities that are being made available. Also, there's the coaching connection. That is also a CAN initiative. And that is really matching black college graduates with mentors in the business community to really help them understand the savvy of not only starting their own business, but also doing well in their positions in companies or within their own companies. Then there's the Business Accelerator, which is designed to help small businesses be encouraged, be developed. So there are a number of initiatives that are going on in Cincinnati that I think are going to help propel us forward, but we just have to continue to be diligent and committed to these initiatives.
And I think another initiative, to Jim's point, was to work with the hardcore unemployed, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, if you talk
among them, ex-offenders, I would suspect.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest gaps, I think, Chip, is the hardcore unemployed. I think the new federal legislation does deal with individuals who are maybe the dislocated worker, and there's been less emphasis on the hardcore chronically unemployed. And so we have to be, to make sure that that hardcore person does get an opportunity. So there are programs that CAN is looking at, and organizations like the Urban League. The hardcore are the individuals that we target in our programming.
Jim talked about access and opportunity. I say with opportunity, we have young men that come to our office, young boys, 13, 14, 15 years old, who come by our office at the African American Chamber who want to work. They asked us, can they wash our windows for us? We told them that they need to come back with their equipment and we would employ them to do just that. They went to a local gas station, got buckets, squeegees, came back the next day and washed our windows for us. So they have entrepreneurial skills. They have an entrepreneurial mindset. It is letting them know that the opportunity for them to own their own business, to control their own destiny by making their own dollars with the skills that they have, putting that to use, and they will be paid for that. They could have easily came over to our office and said, hey, you know, give me $1, give me money, or give me food. They came over wanting an opportunity to gain money for a service that they perform. And we call them our junior chamber members, and it is going to take a collective effort amongst corporate America, governmental governmental agencies, social service agencies, the educational institutions, everyone working together collectively and being real and saying, we want to make a change here in Cincinnati because we do have the human resources, the intellectual resources, and the financial resources to make it happen. But it has to be a conscious and concerted effort.
But there is no level playing field.
The playing field is not level, no. Right. And African Americans came out of the gate late.
I re-emphasize now, I'll just use a quote from Booker T. Washington. He said, there is no need to make a law to compel men to come in contact with a Negro who is educated and has $50,000 to lend.
Okay, that's good. If I may, it's been suggested that one strategy to help level the playing field is through initiative to provide reparations for African American descendants. Representative John Conyers has introduced this in the Congress. Randall Robinson has popularized the concept and started a lot of conversations on this. Would someone like to weigh in on this as a way of expediting, perhaps, the leveling of a playing field through a greater infusion of resources?
Well, I wrote an article a few weeks ago titled Internal Reparations. And while I am for reparations, it's obvious that black people in this country are owed a great deal, but I don't know if that debt can be paid. And in the meantime, when the discussions, or while the discussions are going on, I'm not going to hold my breath and wait until I get my reparations, even though I feel like they are due. But internal reparations suggest that with the $600 billion per year in aggregate income that black people have in this country to spend, that we should take more of that money and use it to start our own businesses and to support those businesses and create the circular effect of our dollars, of those $600 billion within our communities, so that we will, in essence, pay ourselves.
And to be clear, Randall Robinson is not saying writing a lot of individual checks
no,
here.
no.
He's
There are many different
about
ways.
investing
Yes,
in
exactly.
a significant, monumental way
Exactly. But
into
this is
some
internal
recovery,
reparations.
rehabilitative, strengthening programs.
But internal reparationship
Right.
is something we can do right now, tonight.
Right. Okay. All right. Any other vestiges of Jim Crow that you'd like to talk about at this point? Home ownership. How are we doing on home ownership?
That's one of the main things.
Right.
That's one of the main things. Home ownership, entrepreneurship, and education. I mean, and playing a wider role in economic development projects. Black people get very little in economic development projects in this city. And we need a wider role. It's okay to participate in the building of a stadium, but I want to have some vendors and some suppliers and some contractors in the 30-year life of that stadium as well. That's what I'd like to see when it comes to economic development and economic inclusion. We need to have an asset-based model, not always a deficit-based model in our neighborhoods where we live. We must think about asset ownership and control, production, manufacturing, sales, those kinds of things.
Yes, Stan.
You know, I agree with Jim, and I go back to home ownership, to decent paying jobs. You know, work, we talked about work, the finances here tonight, but no one has really, really talked about what a job means to an individual. I mean, a job, makes an individual and that family, have self-respect, and they can go forward, in raising a family in a manner that everyone can be proud of. Without the job, they are empty. So home ownership is very critical, and I certainly think economic development, as Jim indicated, certainly should be addressed in this community, because the African American community has not been treated fairly in this. And I personally think that when a contract is given or money is given, it's not only for minority ownership, but also a commitment on hiring minority workers. That had just not been done for so many years here. I have seen, some minority ownership was given grants, and the entire workforce was white. It just doesn't make sense.
Thank you. We need to bring our session to a close. I want to thank each of you for being here. As we went back, if I go back to our original observation, This is an American dream denied for many African Americans. It sounds like we're making some progress. We've got a long way to go. And you good people and others are leading the way, and we thank you for that. So, Michelle, it's back to you.
Okay, another fascinating discussion, Chip. Thank you.